And so we're continuing a theme that we started last week, and we'll continue it into next week. And it's not the talk title that's in your bulletin, but it's about God's miracles as showing up as each and every one of us, because that's what we are. So we've been exploring this profound statement, and it's from Genevieve Barron's wonderful book, which we have one left outside, Your Invisible Power. I gotta get more of those. Fantastic little book. She wrote this: as you grow in understanding as to who you are, where you came from, what the purpose of your being is, and how you are to fulfill the purpose for which you are intended, you will become a more and more perfect center through which the creative spirit of life can enjoy itself. And this is paraphrase. This is my paraphrase of it. The more you know who you are and whose you are, and the more we live the life we are meant to live, the more God has fun. Because as we said last week, Ernest Holmes wrote it, the divine delights in your expression of it. And since we believe in this oneness, and this oneness is, no one is separate from it. It's within everyone. It might be really covered up in some people, but as we open to it more and more, that divinity, that power, that miracle of who we are gets to shine. And we get to shine our light in the world. And as we do this, the more we can see miracles, the miracles of God through us. There are no miracles in God. That's New Thought. But I love the word miracle. I just love that word. It means, for me, my interpretation is it's normal in the divine mind, which is this incredible creative energy. But when I see certain things, like even how our body functions, to me that's a miracle. When things take place that seem impossible, to me that's a miracle. And to me that word is very uplifting. So I know some New Thought teachers and writers, no such thing as miracles in God. That's fine. There's miracles in my life. If you want to join in that with me, then please do. I just like the word. So I also spoke last week about having choice, about how in every moment of every day we have a choice. We can choose about how we're going to show up in life, how we're going to show up. Or we can choose to ignore that divine wisdom that flows through us, because we are always being inspired. And the more we do our spiritual practices of meditating, of contemplating, of praying, of just getting in touch and feeling that presence within us that's not just coming from our thoughts, but it's coming from somewhere else within us. That's our true self. And it's guiding us in every moment. And we can choose to ignore it, or we can believe what our minds tell us, which usually are not accurate. So we have a choice to be the creator of miracles in our lives, or to be the victims of our lives, to stand up. There are so many things that take place in life where we just have to stand up, to stand in our truth. And that can be very difficult at times, very challenging at times. But I believe that when we stand in our truth, when we face these difficulties that we might go through in life, and we do it with that truth flowing through us, that everything at the other end of that difficulty, which they always move, they're not the divine truth, but everything, we are following a divine guidance within us, and the beauty is that we're stepping into the unknown from that outcome. And usually that unknown is where the divine really truly expresses itself. All things are possible. All things are possible. So we have that choice, remember. That doesn't mean, like I just said, that we won't have a challenge here and there. There's lots of times when life is going really smoothly, and that's great. That's wonderful. We love that. I prefer that. But there are other times where situations arise, and we are in the middle of them. But it doesn't mean that we can't use our spiritual tools that we learn here and the spiritual grounding to move through these different experiences in life and to learn from them. What is it I need to learn? We all need to learn something. All of us need to learn something. So this morning I want us to look at two of God's great miracles in our lives, and we will look at how we can trust in that statement that we say all the time, that God is good. God is good. Even when things don't look good, there's still that divinity that's not affected. You gotta remember that. We are created of God. We are not, God is not in all of our problems and challenges. Okay? That we're going to get into that in a little minute here, because that is such a great little shift for us to remember. So the first of God's great miracles is life itself. Not a demonstration in life, because we like those too, but life itself. The fact that we are here, that I'm standing up here, I'm breathing. I mean, the fact that all my organs, I think they're all working well. I can't see them, but I think they're all working. I believe they're all working well, so that's a miracle to me. It's always a miracle. So a convention of scientists, after many papers and much discussion, concluded that we now know all the secrets of life. All right? That, scientists have to have proof. Thus, God is not necessary. We don't need this God. One of the scientists is commissioned to tell this to God. The scientist gets an audience with God and tells her she is no longer needed, since humans can now create life, etc. And God says, "Show me." The scientist bends over and picks up a handful of dirt when God interrupts. "No, get your own earth." There is nothing. I mean, I respect everyone's right to believe what they want, but I just can't even imagine ever believing that there isn't a higher power of some sort. Even if we believe in nature as some kind of spirituality, because it is very spiritual. But I mean, just the fact that there's earth, the fact that there's, creation, the fact that we have thoughts and emotions that we can't see. That's what faith is. You can't see faith. Each and every one of us, as I said, is a miracle, a growing work of God. And if we think about what it takes to have everything in this physical vehicle that we're in working, and being grateful for the parts that are working. Sometimes some of the parts in our physicality don't feel like they're working, but to be grateful then, to focus on what is working. And I love this. This is a little song that was written by, just one stanza, I'm not going to sing it. It was written by a religious science minister, Reverend Noel McGinnis. It's every little cell in my body is happy. It's very simple. It's cheerful. Every little cell in my body is fine. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is divine. When we start thinking of every cell in our body as being divine, it's uplifting, it's comforting, it's securing. So repeat after me. I rejoice in God's miracle that is my body.
I rejoice in God's miracle that is my body.
Yes. Henry Bergson once said this: an intelligent being carries within him the wherewithal to surpass himself. We can never be anything that we do not have the potential of being. So when people say that word impossible, you know, and I know you can go to I'm possible, and there's lots of other ways of using that, but it's so limiting, and that is not what this teaching is about. This teaching is about expanding growth, limitless potential. We say that, limitless, and so that's us. So we have the potential, and it's always within us. We have to believe in ourselves in order to express that potential. From the very beginning, our pathway to fulfillment is the way of believing that we truly have the ability and seek to cultivate it. However, you're divinely guided. I love the fact that, and we teach this, all we have to know is the what. What do I really want to experience in life? And then let it be. Let the divine take care of how to bring it about, because it always does. And it's always in ways, so many things are running through my mind right now. It's always in ways that we can never imagine. We can't plan them. They just kind of show up. And that's the guidance that when we receive it, to follow it, to really follow it. So I'm gonna talk about a story of, it's a biblical story of the Israelites, okay? Because it's a little bit more metaphysical in there because it has a great meaning in it. Okay, this is in their flight from Egypt. And it's quite meaningful with today's message. Because on the surface, it would seem that it was anything but inspirational. Moses encouraged his people to give up the security, meager as it wasn't the greatest security, and braced themselves to travel into the unknown journey to this vague promised land. Just think about this. It's our lives. Actually, as we measure the distance today, it was about 200 miles. But he must have took the long way. It took, we know, 40 years, right? It took them 40 years to arrive at their destination. 40 years of struggles, disputes, hard work, and frustration. But and you might ask, what is so inspiring about that? Well, a little more insight into the human nature and contemplation of the spiritual meaning of the story. There is a metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. And it's all about, this story is about the coming to the truth consciousness of humankind. That's what it's truly about. Metaphysically interpreted, a country represents a state of consciousness. When we think about these words in the metaphysical interpretations, it kind of changes the whole meaning of them. So Egypt represents a consciousness of bondage, of impoverishment. And that was what they were fleeing, this consciousness. So when we get the first glimpse of truth, we find the vision of the promised land looming large on the horizon, and that it means happiness and peace, some kind of salvation. Now I'm thinking, it's like the immigration that's taking place right now to a promised land, because people are escaping or leaving any way they can lands that are repressive and dangerous. It's the same with the Israelites. It's the same thing. The Israelites had Moses, their leader, and they had a goal, 200 miles. All they had to do was go and enter and possess the land. But what happened? They did arrive easily and quickly at the very border of the land, but then they sent the spies ahead to see what lay ahead for all the people. And what was that report? Well, they came back saying that there were giants in that land, and they were watching these Israelites, and naming them like little grasshoppers coming, and we're the giants. And that reminds me of the parable that I told about the nobody named ordinary last week. What do we do when we get to that border in our consciousness where we're going to take that step? They become giants. The giants are there. So we have now, and I keep thinking of David and Goliath this morning, but it's facing those giant beliefs, because that's what they are. We make most of this stuff up. They're giant beliefs, and we have this little grasshopper consciousness. When it's time for us to wake up and to acknowledge that those giants are a figment of our imagination, they're not the truth. And in the case of the Israelites, they did not have that consciousness yet. They didn't have it yet. That which they desired, even though it was there, it was already there for the taking. When we think about it in our lives, how many times have we not made that move that was there? It was right there. But that would mean we would have to move into that land of the giants. We would have to move out of our comfort zone. And we get scared. We don't even know what we're scared of, but we get scared. The Israelites had gained their freedom from bondage and the enslavement of Egypt. And they had Moses himself as their leader, but something was lacking. Something was lacking, and they were still slaves at heart. They had to wander into the wilderness before they could individually and collectively come to this consciousness of freedom. So it was shifting. When we change life experiences, we're shifting out of one consciousness into another. I remember being for so many years, and even remnants of it are here now, that consciousness of being a victim. You know, it was always someone else's fault that this was happening in my life. If only I would have had that happy childhood. And God forbid you watch TV. Like I came to this country in the late 50s, and I would see these American families and go, wow. You know, I don't know if any of you had that kind of, you might not have come to this country, but you see these, wow. I was hearing a story about someone's mother baking all of this wonderful food and all of these great meals, and I'm like, wow, you weren't even allowed to have dessert. But see, the victim consciousness, playing. So what did I create? More situations and experiences that would ignite that victim consciousness. So it takes great courage for us to step out of that victim consciousness and to know that we are more than grasshoppers. We are not those little grasshoppers. You know, we are powerful beings. So, where was I here? So Moses is leading the people to a land of peace and plenty, and their long years in the wilderness was the long way home. The long way home. But it was the right way. You have to live your life the right way. And that's what feels right to you. Not what someone made up about all these values of how you're supposed to live your life and goals. And I mean, if that works, great. But you don't have to follow like sheep every single belief that has been basically forced upon us. And so they walked into the wilderness until they dropped that grasshopper consciousness, that victim consciousness, and claimed for themselves their own spiritual inheritance. Certainly they were children of God right at the very beginning and all the way through, but they didn't know it. We find our lives like that. We didn't know it. Well, now we know it. We know it. Now we have to embody it. We have to embrace it. We have to live it. With us, sometimes it's finding the right books, and then we read a lot, and we go to lectures, and we take the classes, which I love, by the way. I love classes. But anyway, we take these classes, and we know the truth. We don't know the truth. We know of the truth. We know all the tools and all the mechanics of how this spiritual philosophy and way of living works. But do we really know it? Do we really live it? Do we really use what we talk about in life? We don't have to be afraid and insecure and feel unloved. We really don't. But that's, again, practicing. The more we practice our connection with our divinity within us, the more we create infinite possibilities in our lives. Job said, I had heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth these. Within you is this infinite wealth of possibilities, and yours is the privilege of giving birth to it. There is nothing that anyone in this room is not capable of accomplishing if they truly desire to live it. Within you is the unborn possibilities of limitless living. It's yours. Yours is the privilege of giving birth. So, repeat this after me, please. I rejoice in God's miracle.
I rejoice in God's miracle.
That is the potential within me.
That is the potential within me.
I think what everyone does is a miracle. It doesn't have to be a big, huge accomplishment. It's something moving in that direction and moving in that direction. And whatever it turns out to be, as long as you're following that internal guidance, you're creating. And you can feel it, because it feels good. So the third part of the talk is the miracle of knowing that God is good all of the time. So the key is not to learn how to work miracles, but how to live your miracle by learning how to think, by learning how to keep your mind stayed on the divine that is within you, that divinity. You may say, but the thing I desire, the goal I have set for myself in life is beyond reach. It feels unreachable. There are impassable objects. I just can't help feeling that it is impossible. I've heard people say that. Haven't you heard people say that? Oh, that's impossible. That couldn't possibly happen to me. All things are possible if you have the thought and you have the feeling and you have the desire and you set the intention and you feel it as if it's happening right now. It is possible. The real problem is not in the obstacle. No, it's in our judgment of the obstacle. We judge everything. And it's not the situation itself. Obstacles are essentially mental barriers. There is this obstacle complex that sometimes we find ourselves in, and that wall keeps us back. And it's a problem for many of us. Columbus faced that obstacle, that belief that the world was flat, until he discovered another continent. So I know there's historical things but it goes with the story, okay, Norman? Okay, I'm reading his mind.
Columbus Schmumbus.
Speed was once limited by the sound barrier, right? Which was broken. This opened up the possibility of speed that ultimately approaches the speed of light. Every time we have an Olympics, is not another record broken? Impossible to do that. And yet someone comes along with that determination, that belief that yes, I can, and they break that record. The truth is, this is the truth, there is no law of limitation. There is none. All things are possible. There is only the law of supply and all sufficiency in all times. And look up, contemplate, and when we say look up, it really means to look within. Contemplate the facts from the highest point of view. From your divine mind, there is one mind, that's God's mind. That's the mind you're using when you listen to that divine guidance. When Jesus stood before 5,000 hungry people and his disciples reported insufficient food, it would have been easy to have said only a miracle could take care of this. But we read, looking up to heaven, he blessed the food, gave gratitude, and told the disciples to distribute what they had, and there was abundance. It's a good story. I like these stories because they make beautiful sense. Ernest Holmes liked these stories too. Heaven is within us. It is with us. That's what Jesus said when he was looking up. Heaven is within us. He knew the truth. He was a truth teacher. The need to look up and to see it, to apply it, that's very important, the action, to comprehend it. Hard to understand, the day may come when we know more of the omnipresence of substance. But right now is a law of demonstration. We need to have the faith to believe that we truly are creators, co-creators of our lives. We have within us all possibilities. I can't say it enough. Jesus said, ye say it is 4 months to the harvest, but I say lift up your eyes, for the fields are already white with harvest. No miracle, but a new perception beyond appearances. Sometimes we have to look, most of the time, beyond appearances. Life always carries with it the means to bring to pass that which we have in our consciousness to see. What are you seeing? What's in your consciousness? How is your faith? How is your faith? How deep is your faith? So, repeat this after me. I rejoice in the miracle.
I rejoice in the miracle.
That God is good all the time.
That God is good all the time.
It's for us to hold. We are the ones to hold that. We are the ones. Albert Einstein once said, there are only 2 ways to live your life. One is through nothing is a miracle, and then the other is through everything is a miracle. You get to choose. You get to choose. And I'd like to close this talk today with a reading by Ernest Holmes. In his book he wrote, Jesus said, if ye have the faith as a grain of mustard seed, he shall say unto the mountain, move hence to yonder place, and it shall move, and nothing shall be impossible to you. Then Holmes continues, faith is centered in and cooperates with divine mind. Because we fail to realize that, principle is not bound by precedent. That's one of my favorite sayings in Science of Mind. Principle, that which has gone on before, is not bound to always be that way. Principle is not bound by what the law, the experiences are not bound by what has gone on before. We are open to infinite ways of thinking. That's what that means. And then back to Holmes. We limit our faith to that which has already been accomplished, and few miracles result. When through intuition, faith finds its proper place under divine law, there are no limitations, and what are called miraculous results follow. If we are to have an active faith, the faith of God, rather instead of merely the faith in God. Remember that? That's a very important, yes, on all the practitioner tests. Have the faith of God, not just the faith in God. One's separate, and the one is unified. Our thought must be centered in universal mind. We must be convinced that under divine law, all things are possible. If we only believe and work in conformity with the principles of that law. Such a faith does not spring full-orbed into being, he said, but grows by knowledge and experience. No matter what the outside appearance, we must cling steadfastly to the knowledge that God is good, and God is all underneath, above, and round about. Thus we shall be able to say with conviction, I know in whom I have believed. So, believing and moving forward, expecting miraculous occurrences in our lives. Know that we are always, this was a big one for me to learn, to know that I am always supported and loved and guided in every single circumstance and experience in my life, just to really deepen into that. And sometimes we have to go into that experience in order to really know it. And so once you know it, you own it. You own it. So really, my whole point of this talk this morning is really for us to move ahead in life, to truly believe that whatever circumstances that come up that we are going through, and if there's not one now, there will be, because that's life, that we are the controllers of our destiny, truly. We are incredible manifestors. We are incredible creators of our lives, but we need to hear it, we need to believe it, and then we need to act as if it is absolutely true, because it is. And that's what I have today.
Woo-hoo!